Apologies. Welcome to this session where we give feedback on the Spore assessment, what we're calling the roots assessment. And so I want to thank all of you for taking time to fill in this kind of an assessment. It's very important because it helps us to begin to think of how we situate our lives. And so one may ask the question, what is it about the roots assessment? And the roots assessment is about the foundations that you build for your life as a young person. In our induction meeting, we had spoken many things, and one of the things we said is that the foundations that you build in your 20s are so important. Some of them will end up to affect the kind of decisions that you'll make in your 30s, in your 40s, sometimes in your 50s, and they may even live with you up to 100 years. That's how critical some of the decisions that you're making in your life are. And so the SPORE assessment travels through time to really unearth what is deep in your subconscious that perhaps explains the motivations and the factors and the reasons behind why you make certain decisions. So the roots assessment is looking at your life across the 6 pillars that we had mentioned: your personal value system, which are basically the principles with which you live with. You seeking to look at your family pillar, as we had mentioned, that the family is a very, very important ingredient part of your life. And in any case, a lot of decisions that you'll be making in your life would more or less just be replicating that which you are in your, what your family was basically, what basically your family was. And so, one of the things that we realized that how did we end up to construct the roots assessment? And the roots assessment has been built depending on how we've observed lives of many people who have reached what we are calling the sunset. And this is important because phase two of the SPORE is actually going to send you in communities. So you'll be spending a lot of time with people in communities. And so you'll be looking at people at different stages of life. But even deep as you reflect on this experience, you'll realize that in most cases, when you go back to your villages, as you look at the broad spectrum of people and you trace the stories of each person, you realize that there are people who started off and they started off when things were working pretty well for them. And probably they kept on sustaining how things were working for them. But there are also other people who didn't start right, but they were able to get it right along the way. And so, towards the sunset years, which will more or less be old age, you'll be quite impressed with the kind of lives that they have. And at the same time, you also have got people who never got it right from the beginning, and they've had to live with the consequences of the never getting it right in the beginning. And now, what is most important is that getting it right is not an issue of being measured from the point of money or material possession, but is in a very, very important element that you realize, which is peace that people experience in old age. So, as you sit through communities, you'll be spending a lot of time to try to understand to what extent are people peaceful with the lives that they have lived and where they are in their lives. So, one of the things that we come to realize is that people who experience peace in old age are people who are able to build right. And these are people who spend time getting the foundations right. And these foundations are also built in a particular order that you just can't be building life focusing on certain things and you're not focusing on others. Remember what we say, that when you think about legacy, legacy in itself is an intersection of a life that is fulfilled, a life that is balanced, and at the same time, a life that is adaptable. So it is where these three circles meet. That is actually what you call positive, or that's what you call sustainable legacy. So not unless an individual is able to live a fulfilled life, not unless an individual is able to live a balanced life, not unless somebody is able to live an adaptable life, then they can never experience what you're actually calling legacy. So legacy is something that we can trace on how somebody has lived, because legacy in itself is not what comes after you leave, but it's basically how you live each and every single day. So we come to conclude that peace is something that you work on. It is not something that is going to locate you. It is something that you have to be very deliberate to work on. And if you don't get it right in your youthful years, you'll spend a lot of time in old age as you struggle through trying to find meaning in life, because then your life is full of regrets. So it's therefore important to build right. And as a result of looking at how certain people have been able to experience peace in old age, we came to conclude that these people have also built their lives in a certain way. It's kind of Where do you get it right first, and what moves next to what and what all the way to the end? And so we came to conclude as we studied different people that the first place for which one must build is the personal value system. Somebody must be very clear on their principles. This is the compass, this is the direction of how they make decisions in life. There are certain things that they put higher than others. So a value system is not about morality, because some people tend to confuse um, some people tend to confuse morality with values. But in real case, values anything that you place higher. It could be about your standards, it could be about your principles, it could be about the things that you tolerate, it could be about the things that you can't tolerate. It's about the things that you give preference to. And basically, this is what you call your decision structure. And as a young person, you have to be very clear in life. What are the standards that you subject any decision before you make? So some people will be like, I can't make a decision that offends certain principles. So that's what you're calling the value system. And so if you realize people have experienced peace in old age, are people who were able to get their personal value system right. And that personal value system is a foundational pillar within which they are now able to make other decisions. The second thing that they have to get right is getting it right as far as family is concerned. And the relationships within family are so sacred that they are supposed to be kept no matter what happens. Somebody must be very deliberate to work towards restoring those relationships. And we'll actually be discovering this as we keep on exploring the journey of the Spore and as we keep on understanding the work of the intergenerational dialogue. The third thing that one has to get right is the spiritual pillar, because it's very important to realize that a human being is a spiritual being. Now, what happens in most is that a lot of people will be carrying around the spiritual formation which was inherited either from their parents or what the environment provided to them. But they have never sat down to seriously examine why they make certain decisions as far as religion is concerned. Why do you believe the things that you believe? If today you had been born in China, would you be the Christian or would you be the Muslim that you are today? Or are you basically subscribing to a certain faith because that's what you found your parents to be subscribing to? Or a particular geographical space was actually believing in such kind of religious connotations or spiritual undertaking or a certain faith formation? So it's very, very important that you are able to harmonize, and you'll see that your family, together with religion, play a big role in terms of how you develop your personal value system. Although also at the same time, the personal value system also ends up to affect how you relate with the family and also how you make your spiritual formation. So these pillars actually have a way in which they are kind of interdependent. They are affecting each other. So you find spiritually affecting family, which is affecting your personal value system, and the personal value system is again affecting family, and also at the same time it's also affecting your spiritual formation. So you can never say that this is where a personal value system starts and this is where family is. But it's always important just to reflect that yes, these are critical pillars in your life. The fourth thing that you need to get right is your social pillar. And that has got everything to do with the certain number of connections that you have to make in your life. It's very important to realize that as a human being, you are not going to live in this world alone. It doesn't belong to your parents, it doesn't belong to your siblings, it doesn't belong to your grandmother. So you'll actually be living in the midst of people. And I'm sure you've come across the cliche that man is a social being. So it's very important to realize that you will actually be forming friendships, you'll actually be forming connections, you'll actually be forming the networks. And as a young person, I'm sure you've come across the statements such as your net worth is actually, your network is actually your net worth. That as you build the social capital, that is actually how you're able to navigate through the problems of life and even be in a position to expand the capabilities that you have. So it's just very, very important that you know that even right now you're beginning to form connections and friendships or relationships that will become so impactful in your own life. Are you doing the right thing as far as getting those connections is concerned? It's after this social pillar that now we address the career pillar. That your career pillar is supposed to be reinforcing the first four pillars that we've mentioned. Your career should be consistent with your personal value system, and your personal value system should also be guiding the kind of career decisions that you'll be making. As a young graduate, you're faced with critical dilemmas. You want to go back to school and study. Are you going to study the same thing or maybe study something else different? As a young person, are you going to go into the world of full-time employment, Or are you going to go into the world of self-employment, or even a combination of both? It could be both the three or a configuration of any two. Self-employment with going back to school, self-employment together with parts of full-time employment, which now does what is employment or what you call part-time employment together with a side hustle. Or you could be saying that I'll actually be fully employed while at the same time I'll actually be doing my part-time classes. These are critical decisions that you're supposed to make because in a way they're also going to affect the relationships that you have. They'll also end up to affect your spirituality. They'll also end up to affect the family values that will actually be developing. So it's important to know that your career pillar is so critical, but it's not actually the one at the top. The way I know that when you are a young graduate, what you tend to focus more is how do I ensure that at least I have something that is keeping me going. Yet we are realizing that the people who got it right, the people who experience peace, are people who didn't necessarily put career at the top. They were actually able to prioritize getting the other pillars right. And as a result of that, the career was basically coming to complement what they are doing. And once the career pillar has been gotten right with the other four pillars right, it becomes now possible for you to fix the sixth pillar, which we call the financial pillar. Because finances in themselves is not just a matter of finances, but is a broader issue. It has everything to do with your values. Money in itself is emotion. What is your relationship with money? And that's why one of the questions that we actually asked you in the assessment is how did you observe money being looked at in your own family? Was money seen as a tool of liberation? Was money seen as an opportunity for you to grow? Or what exactly was associated with money? Did you all grow up with scarcity? So you could actually come across what some people call the abundance mentality. Some people even refer to what you call the scarcity mentality. Because if you are born from the scarcity mentality, then you never believe that there will be enough for you. So you are always panicking. You are always making decisions out of fear because you are afraid that you could actually go back to poverty. Same thing with survival, because you grew up through survival, so you think that everything around money, you must be struggling, you must be fighting people for you to basically get it. But there are also other people who grew up in the folly of abundance. So because there was so much, so they also can't make decisions. They think that money will always be available. So they also even don't know how to multiply those resources. Some of them even struggle with the savings. And so even as you interact with the Spore program, you'll actually be faced with some of these dilemmas. How do you acquire the discipline around resources, big decisions around savings, big decisions around investment, big decisions as far as spending is concerned? Are you a spendthrift? Are you a frugal person? Or who exactly are you? So these questions are part of the foundational pillars. So it's very, very important that as we interact with the process of the spore, we are actually trying to fix these foundational pillars as far as our lives are concerned. Now, it's always also very, very important to say that as you're going through your reports, we're actually able to realize several dynamics that some of you actually have got certain pillars which are very well developed, whereas other pillars are not very, very well developed. Now that leads me to the next part of the report, which has got everything to do with where do we put you as far as the foundations are gotten right. Now, one of the things is that as you go through college has a way in which it disrupts everything that you had acquired before you arrived in college. Because you don't arrive in college as tabula rasa. You don't arrive there as a blank slate. You arrive there, you've seen how money was being looked at. You arrived there with certain principle or certain values. You arrive there with a certain spiritual formation. You arrive in college with a certain orientation of the career. That's why you actually call for a specific program that you're going to undertake while in college. But the experience of college is such a way that you interact with many people and they are coming from different backgrounds as well as contexts. And so as a result of that, you are already affecting and being affected by other people. So everything is literally changing around your life. And it's very difficult to understand how that change happens because you are deep in the motion. Every single day, every interaction you have, every space you go to, every day you wake up, and every activity you get engaged in is always affecting your life. Now, the most interesting part is that you do not know how it ends up to affect. It could be a loss that you experience around money, but it ends up to affect a lot of other pillars in your life. It may be a heartbreak that you encounter that ends up to affect how you relate with other people. It may be failure of a particular paper that forces you to confront certain things. So college experiences are so diverse. College experiences are so deep. Only that you do not know to what extent and how exactly they begin to influence and to change who you become while you are there. That is why when we are looking at your foundations, we are actually asking ourselves the question, to what extent did college shape that which you arrived with? Now, it's very interesting that if you went to college and you are not affected by college, that is equally dangerous because you are just postponing being affected. Because something must actually be shaken. So you're also very keen when we're giving you this kind of an assessment to establish to what extent did college end up to shake up the foundations which you had. The most important thing is to check that even when you are affected, you are coming out of it and emerging as someone who is different. It's not that you just go through those experiences and you avoid them and you come out like nothing happened to you. Basically, get dipped into them, they affect you, they force you to reflect, and as you step out, you actually come out as a different person. You are no longer as innocent as you arrived, but at the same time, you are not definitely have gotten it. So there's something that you've done. And as a result of that, we're actually able to put you on a 4 level. So the first level is what we say that you are integrated. You're integrated in the sense that you've used the experience that you got in college to now to be part of the foundation that you have formed. So let's say, for instance, that you went to college and you had a heartbreak. Now, how does it inform now how you relate with other people? It doesn't mean that you are not going to relate with people of the opposite gender, but you are using the experiences of that heartbreak now to understand how you're actually supposed to form relationships. So, as a result of that, we can say that you are integrated. Now, supposing you went through this particular heartbreak, you're still going through it. You're not saying that now I'm not going to relate, but you're actually now trying to pick those experiences. What do I need to get right or what do I not need to get right? You're still not yet there. You're still struggling through, trying to get it. So we will actually say that you are integrating at that particular point. But you could also go through this particular heartbreak and it affects you so much that you're like, I am never now no longer going to relate. So you become what you call an avoidant. Or on the other hand, you went through college and you completely avoided relationships. So if we realize that you belong to any of these two, either you avoided relationships totally because you're like, you do not want a heartbreak, we'll actually not call you that you are integrated. Neither are you integrating. We'll actually say that you are holding. There's just something a little bit holding you before things go wrong. Or you went through the heartbreak, but it has affected you so much. So much as you're trying to stay sober, you are so much affected, it might have left you with a lot of scars that you basically struggling even to pick up on a meaningful relationship. So as a result of that, we label you to be holy. But there are also people who go through these kind of shocks. They are too much. A relationship affects you so much that your life completely collapses. Probably even you drop out of college, you are crying most of the time, you are almost depressed. We will now basically say that you have collapsed. So those are the 4 levels that we actually look at each of these pillars. Whether it's your spiritual life, whether it is your personal value system, whether it is your social life, whether it is your family, or whether it is career, or whether it is related to money. That a functional human being who is actually able to live a fulfilled life, who is able to live a balanced life, should be somebody who is going to use the experiences of college and how much they shook you now to become important lessons that can now shape now who you end up to become. So if you went through college and it hasn't affected you, just know that there is also still a challenge somewhere because something will actually come. And if you've really not sat down to critically examine the particular patterns or the principles with which you're living with, then when that time comes, if you're not careful, you'll definitely fall. So that's why it's always important. This stage of the spore, a young person really spends a bit of time, and that's what you'll actually be doing. In phase 1, you are carefully going to be examining the patterns that you have. How come you make the decisions that you make? Why are you in this spiritual formation? Why is your family as it is? And I remember, I think, telling you that you need to have a very honest conversation with yourself in the next 23 days, even to look at the relationship between your parents or your significant adults. Because many a times when you look at those relationships, We tend to look at our parents from the point of providers, from the point of perfection, but we never look at them from the point of human beings. Parents, as people, also have dreams and aspirations that perhaps worked or didn't work. Probably, if you have got a very honest conversation with your dad, you might realize that your mom was probably not the best of the options that he had. But what has actually survived all these years, 25 years, 26, 27, 30, 40 years, is probably not the romance that you also probably have with a girl somewhere. So probably you look at your dad as the best dad, but probably you've never seen your dad as the husband that your mom sees, and vice versa. So that because you're probably like, I've never seen my parents fighting, but you've never sat behind the tent to understand the kind of struggles that you literally have had to have. The reasons why probably your dad just woke up and left the other family members. There will always be that one uncle who leaves and doesn't really want now to associate with the rest of the family members. So probably only comes when there is a funeral, or probably only appears during special occasions. Left maybe even a huge piece of land, but really just doesn't want to interact with anyone. And I'm sure you've seen how frosty relationship with cousins can actually get. As our parents tell you that not go to stay with so and so. And so as you mature, it now leaves you with a lot of questions. Why is it that even when I'm struggling, I really can't appeal to my cousin who is also in the city to help me find a job, because a relationship was never built right from the beginning? And as you step into this phase, you have a lot of questions. Why do I believe what I believe in? This religion. Do I need to continue believing in it or not? And so many things will just have happened. Probably when you're growing up, your religion told you that you are not supposed to take alcohol. But now you went through college. You've tested alcohol and you've seen pastors struggling, you've seen CEO officials, you've seen leaders of your religion struggling with the same thing, whether it's about sexual abuse. And that's also something very, very big that as a young person, you actually have to spend time to try and understand to what extent is sex shaping the decisions that you're making, because it does in a big way. And I always say that you become an adult the day you consciously choose to have sex, because you're never going to go back to your parents to ask for permission. And this is the time now when you begin now institutionalizing a secret life. This is a space that you now create for yourself. And every heartbreak that you're going to have is actually going to affect your romantic life, it's actually going to affect your marital life. And every decision that you make around the same is affected so much by the decisions around sex that you're actually making in your own life. So it's always important that during the first one, you have got enough time. And this is the reason why we've created to be a sacred moment for you and you alone. You don't need to be discussing with anyone. Just sit and reflect on your own life. The questions that are there actually going to sit uncomfortable with you. And that phase one is a very, very uncomfortable phase to be in, because you'll be forced to confront perhaps some of the questions that you've never just had time for you to confront. And it's fine. That's why it's a personal journey. You create the 2 hours every day for the next 23 days that you go through the workbook that we are going to give to you to guide you and to walk the journey with you. We'll be there to provide a support system as a group, because even part of the social pillar is to be vulnerable with other people. It's always important as a young person to know that you don't need to go through life alone. You should always trust that there can also be other people whom you can actually build a relationship and to work with you. Now, most importantly, I also need to mention this as to you as a young person, that even as you relate with other young people, it's always important, whether they are people of the same gender or of the different gender, but there must also be a question of boundaries. And this one I'll speak with a lot of authority to say that within your network, you must always have people that you're very clear in your mind. No matter what happens, these people will never see my nakedness. There must always be people that you respect and you're like, no matter what happens, I'm never going to sleep with this person. Because that's how actually you begin building boundaries. So you cannot just be a young person who believes that anybody who comes your way, you must actually unclothe for them. So it doesn't work that way. That's part of how you're going to strengthen your social pillar. Because there must really be people that you relate from a point of how they're going to build you. And you are going to need a number of them, and we'll be taking you through the process of how to arrive in such a support system. But it's very, very important to know that you should never isolate. You should never be brought. You should never just sit there and feel that you are alone. You're actually not alone. You're supposed to pick the ability for you to step out and form friendships. And some of these friendships should actually be for a long time. But friendship does not replace family. As you'll be realizing throughout the journey of the Spore, that family is very, very critical. And so we're not going to tell you that replace your family with friends. So if you find yourself in a space where you feel that friends are more important than your family members, there is a problem somewhere. Why are you running away from home? There is a way in which family has probably hurt you to such an extent that you do not trust anymore that family can actually be a safe refuge. But yet, what makes critical families are families that believe in responsibility, they believe in the value of respect, and at the same time, they also believe in the value of compassion. So, as you sit to reflect on your own families, you should actually look at it. What did your family teach you as far as responsibility was concerned? Were people pushing responsibility to other people? Were people ready to be held to account? Or you could lie in your own family and place it on other people. So, how did they look at the concept of honesty or the value of honesty? Do they look at accountability? If you do something, you have to apologize for it. Did you really also have to take, like, if you're taking money from your brother or your sister, are you actually going to return it? Do you ask for forgiveness? These are critical things that end up to make a family sustainable and a family that is worth to write home about. Because if a family does not instill some of these values into your life, it will be very difficult for you to learn them, because then you have to unlearn what the family gave to you. Then you now learn, or probably to relearn new approaches. So the first phase is very, very critical, and we'll ask you that to be very comfortable with the discomfort that comes with phase one. The good thing is that you can do phase one from anywhere. So as you sit to reflect on your report, it will be guiding you together with the workbook that you have on how to go through phase one. Now, as you head towards phase two, this is now the moment where you are now going to spend adequate time within the community. And it's actually going to force you to spend time to look at the decisions that people made earlier on in life. And as I've mentioned, or as we've mentioned in the previous occasions, is that you're going to have adequate time to stay with people who have lived, with the people who went ahead of you. And we can tell you that you are not the first one. People right from your village have done stuff that you can never imagine. There was that guy who was the first one to buy a car. There's that guy who's probably the first one to go to a national school, to go to the university, to build maybe a stone house, to buy something that probably nobody thought about, to fly out, to have that big piece of land, maybe to have lived the oldest, maybe to even to have done a wedding. That person was run the longest business in the village. You have to spend a bit of time to sit under them and to understand what exactly it means for them to have built to reach where they reached. And as you reflect on their current lives, is it where they were at the same age with which you are? And as you sit down to look at that community, to realize that everyone in your community has a story. So it's actually going to help you to appreciate that even as you build right now, there are people who went ahead of you and built. And I'll give you an example. I see a lot of people say that it's our time as the youth. But then I'm like, every generation has actually had youthful people who have actually made the whole difference. And I can tell you that Tom Boyer in his 20s was already flying people to the US to go and look for studies. That's people like Barack Obama Sr. actually got opportunities to go abroad. People like Francis Masahalia, who went abroad, studied, got first degrees, people like B. Watt, and they came back that as early as 1960s, they already had degrees, and they were the people who went up to shape the Kenyan economy. Someone like James Orengo, he was already elected to parliament at the age of 25. So if you talked about the Gen Z of that time, they were already there. So it's not something that is a little bit new for you to feel that you've discovered something that is so big. But what has actually kept the fire of people like Orengos for all these years, and others who are there with them, ended up also to fall along the way. What has actually made, for instance, if we really just use that example of James Orengo, what has actually kept Orengo in the game for a very long time, whereas other people like him, akina Wafula Buke, akina Mwandawiro Muganga, akina Miguna Miguna, and the rest have struggled to reach where Orengo has reached. How come Orengo has remained relatively available throughout all these regimes? He was there when Kenyatta Senior was there. He was there when Moi was there. He was there when Kibaki, Uhuru Kenyatta, and now William Ruto. And a story is told of how Jaramogi being under house arrest will just, when you will receive delegations, just better, mmetoka Ugenya, mmenionea Orengo, go back msalimie huyo kijana. And that will be enough to land Orengo to become a member of parliament. So what did some of these people get right, that they were actually able to rise to the top, and others have not been able to rise to the top? As you spend time in the village, you'll come across that guy who speaks very good English, but probably things just never worked. He started off pretty well. Things didn't work out. He came back to the village and his life just stagnated. what really makes the story of such a person. So as you go to your village, open up your eyes just to understand exactly what is happening. So this assessment is an entry into your life. It is an invitation for you to reflect on your life every single day. And throughout this Spore journey for the next 90 days, we invite you to sit comfortable with this report. Keep reading through it, revising it over and over again. Let it be part of you, your company, together with your workbook. Sit with it, enjoy, read through it. We will be there to offer any kind of clarification. And at any given time, when you feel like you want us to discuss a particular component within that particular report, you always have my telephone number. You can always dial me, you can send me a WhatsApp text, you can make a phone call to me, and we can always speak about it. At this point in time is to welcome you and say, we are now ready for the Spore. And with that, you are officially inducted and welcome to the Spore community right away. Have a good one. See you the other side. Asante.